for life for the torture and inhuman killing of Arthur Labinjo Hughes. Arthur was just 6 years old when his life was brutally taken. Today, his dad and his girlfriend were jailed for a campaign of abuse and a killing that shocked us all. Also tonight, a review outlines the ticketless, drunken, drugged-up thugs and the clear mistakes by authorities that almost caused deaths at the Euro 2020 final.
We were seconds away from a Hillsborough-type disaster in terms of potential fatalities and life-changing injuries.
Yorkshire County Cricket Club removes its entire coaching team in the wake of the racism investigation at the club. And the giant leap for a small explorer, the 4-year-old who trekked his way into the record books.
What was the hardest bit?
None of it.
None of it was hard?
None of it.
This is the ITV Evening News with Charlene White.
Good evening. A judge set out in horrific detail today the unimaginable suffering and torture endured by 6-year-old Arthur Labinjo Hughes in the final months of his short life. He was poisoned with huge doses of salt, starved, tormented and made to stand for hours in the hall as punishment. He was forced to sleep on the floor with no bed and regularly beaten by his father, Thomas Hughes, and his girlfriend, Emma Tustin. She delivered the blows that finally killed him. His emaciated body was hit with such force, the jury heard it was like he'd been in a traffic accident. Today, the couple was sentenced for their crimes. Tustin jailed for a minimum of 29 years, Hughes for 21. Our correspondent, Ben Chapman, was in court.
If they had never met, a thriving little boy would be alive today. The words of Arthur Labinjo Hughes' grandmother as a judge jailed what he called a pitiless father and his calculating girlfriend. He said Emma Tustin and Thomas Hughes had relished making Arthur suffer.
He's banged himself the radiator, he's hit me, he's kicked me in the process.
Repeatedly lying about the campaign of torture and violence they inflicted on this once contented 6-year-old boy. Jailing Tustin for at least 29 years, the judge said she was a manipulative woman who would tell any lie and shift the blame onto anyone to save her own skin. Sentencing Thomas Hughes to 21 years, he said, "You were Arthur's father, in a position of trust, and bore the prime responsibility for protecting him."
Tustin didn't even come into court to hear her sentence. The judge said the pair of them had subjected Arthur to unimaginable suffering, behaviour that was often spiteful and at times sadistic.
Videos shown to the jury were of a frail, thin child who could barely stand after being beaten, starved and poisoned with salt in the last 3 months of his life. In a victim impact statement to the court, his paternal grandmother Joanne Hughes today claimed he was failed by the authorities after she'd sent social workers a photograph showing bruises on Arthur's back 2 months before he died. This senior Conservative MP is concerned the system is still letting children down.
We've got social workers who are severely stretched, feeling rather burnt out, and we had the pandemic coming along, making their job that much harder as well. There's a combination of reasons behind this case, but too often it's the same old reasons reheated, and we've really got to tackle that.
In her statement to the court, Arthur's mother said his killers had taken away his sparkle, that he was let down by someone he trusted. A case review will look at whether the authorities let him down too.
In the last half an hour, the leader of the council in Solihull, where Arthur was living, has issued a statement. Ian Courts says he's shocked and appalled at Arthur's death, and he says, "I'm very clear that we will leave no stone unturned to understand, learn and fix any issues that the independent review finds." Ultimately, though, there were only 2 people responsible for Arthur's death, Emma Tustin and Thomas Hughes, and tonight they are both beginning long prison sentences.
Ben, thank you. Government scientists have warned that the Omicron variant could lead to a very large wave of infections and high numbers of people ending up in hospital. The Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies say it's very likely Omicron will escape current immunity, but it's not clear by how much. Wales recorded its first case of the variant today, with the total across the UK now passing 50. There was some positive news, though. Research showed COVID booster jabs significantly strengthen immunity. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Anushka Asthana.
It was cold and wet, but people came out to queue all across the country, not waiting in line for the shops, but for something else in high demand this Christmas.
I just turned up because I like to have my booster.
That third COVID vaccination that this woman was eligible for in Haverhill.
The first time we went, we were told we were a week out. So we tried last week and we were told we were 1 day out. So we've come today and thankfully we've had our jab today.
But in Stratford, this man was not. Then in Portsmouth, maybe this lady had heard the good news.
Brilliant, well done.
A new study shows the booster provides strong protection against COVID's Beta and Delta variants.
We would hope that a similar protection against hospitalisation and death might be possible against the Omicron variant. But that's speculation, and we can't say that for certain at this point.
The new variant comes on top of rising infection. Overall, there were a further 50,584 COVID cases across the UK today. In England, the rate hit 1 in 60 by the end of last month, according to the ONS. The age group with the biggest proportion of people testing positive was for those of primary school age or younger, at 4.67%. But the over 70s had the lowest rate of infection, at 0.4%, suggesting the booster programme is working. How well it will work against the new variant is being tested at Glasgow's Centre for Virus Research.
We are basically trying to isolate the Omicron variant.
Where today they were looking into whether Omicron will evade the vaccines.
Hi, Glasgow.
In the same city, new Omicron cases were linked to a Steps concert at a packed venue, with numbers rising across Scotland, England, and with the first case in Wales as Christmas approaches. That's why the booster programme is being ramped up, but it will inevitably pile pressure on doctors.
But I think what we need to be honest about is the fact that there's a finite capacity within the healthcare system. We can't do everything for everyone, but what we can do is to prioritise the care of our most vulnerable and the ones who've been affected by chronic health conditions.
So another stressful winter for the NHS, but with some good news: the positive vaccine studies and the fact that no one has been hospitalised with Omicron in England yet.
Anushka, there's a real race on, isn't there, to get those boosters delivered? But it's going to be a challenge, isn't it?
It certainly is. I mean, 3 days ago, there was this big headline that all adults would be offered the booster jab within 3 months of their second jab. But the reality is that to deliver that is way harder than just to set it out. And in fact, the NHS in England has set out how it's going to manage it in a letter today. And it is quite interesting. I think there are 3 things I would pick out. First of all, that even to cut that time down, they need a new legal framework, and they can't just snap their fingers and deliver that. They say it could take up to December the 13th before the rules change at all. And then it's going to go down age group by age group. Now, initially over 40s, and that's 7 million extra people overnight. So to get that out there, they're going to bring in the military to help with logistics. They're going to bring in retired doctors, and they're going to get students to help as well. But also, as you were hearing, real pressure on other NHS services. So the reality of the trade-offs are included in this letter, and they include things like normal health checks for the over 75s for new patients being deferred by GPs, and also GPs not providing some other non-urgent services.
OK, Anushka, thank you. The England fan violence and disorder at the Wembley final of Euro 2020 was lucky not to have resulted in someone being killed. That was one of the conclusions of a damning report into the fighting in July, which was branded a day of national shame. Around 2,000 so-called ticketless thugs stormed the stadium. One even hijacked a disabled child to get in. Here's our sports editor, Steve Scott, on what went wrong.
Fuelled by alcohol and drugs, a violent and ticketless mob numbering 2,000 tailgated, stormed disabled gates or fire exits and broke into the stadium. Baroness Casey described it as a perfect storm. Wembley only three-quarters full, COVID restrictions relaxed, no fan zones nearby, and England in their first major final in 55 years. And shockingly, she is convinced we came very close to a national tragedy.
I was horrified. I mean, the scenes of disorder were horrific. The fan behaviour was terrifying, not terrible. It was on a different level and a different league to what I thought from the original coverage. We were seconds away.
Seconds away from a Hillsborough-type disaster?
We were seconds away from a Hillsborough-type disaster in terms of potential fatalities and life-changing injuries.
Among the many key findings, the final exposed weaknesses in Wembley's security operation, unprecedented levels of criminal and antisocial behaviour, and a collective failure by the organisers to plan for the worst-case scenario that could have led to serious injuries or even deaths. Scott Furlong took his son Cian to Wembley that day. He was at one of the disabled gates as the thugs tried to break in.
Once we were in the gun cage, the door to the concourse was kicked in, which hit Cian. It's not about being a football fan or anything like that. It's getting what you can for free. It's preying on the weak, if you like. It's not human behaviour. It's a disgrace.
While the report does not single out individuals or organisations for blame, it does point to collective failures. Among them, the FA and police, who did not recognise this was more than just a football match. It was an event of national significance. And by the time the police arrived in numbers at Wembley, it was too late to move the thousands who'd been there for most of the day. Did you misjudge it on the day?
I don't think that it's about misjudging it on the day. I think what she's saying is that when you plan an event in advance of this size and scale, you've got to treat it differently. Actually, we put in place many things which we've never put in place before. We had our biggest ever team of stewards. We had our biggest ever security presence there.
Among Baroness Casey's recommendations, a new security level for matches of this importance, stronger penalties for football-related disorder, and an FA-led campaign to tackle the worst of supporter behaviours. Some good may yet emerge from England's day of shame. Steve Scott, ITV News, Wembley.
To more sporting shame now, and 16 members of coaching staff at Yorkshire County Cricket Club have left in the wake of the racism scandal. They include Director of Cricket Martin Moxon, who'd been in charge since 2007. During the time, former player Azim Rafiq was a victim of racist abuse and bullying. Our North of England reporter Sangeeta Lala is at Headingley tonight. Sangeeta, significant changes.
This is a really significant move by the new chair, Lord Patel, who's no doubt trying to show that his club does not tolerate racism and discrimination of any kind. Now, the entire coaching staff have left Yorkshire County Cricket Club, including the director. Martin Moxon has been the director for 14 years, but will no longer remain in his post. Head coach Andrew Gale has also left, both of them accused by Azim Rafiq of racism when he shared his testimony to the Select Committee of MPs last month, which was incredibly difficult for many people to watch and has clearly had an impact on the new chair, Lord Patel, who today said he would do whatever is necessary to regain trust for a club that is trying to stamp out the culture it's now becoming associated with. Now, in total, the club says 16 people will be leaving, including some backroom medical staff. It's understood, though, this is a club decision, not the decision of individuals. But the club says that this is a move that needs to happen. Yorkshire County Cricket Club, England's most successful team, though, will now have to find a whole group of new coaches before the new term next year, and it's a move that will come ahead of England and Wales Cricket Board's review of dressing room culture across the sport.
Sangeeta, thank you. A man convicted of acting as head of propaganda for a banned neo-Nazi terror group has received an extended 10-year prison sentence. 32-year-old Ben Raymond co-founded the racist organisation National Action in 2013. The judge said the group planned to recruit young people and Raymond's role was in effect grooming them. He will serve at least 5 years and 4 months in prison. Energy regulator Ofcom has launched an inquiry into how tens of thousands of homes have been left without power for days following Storm Aarwin. A week on, more than 10,000 families are still without electricity in parts of North East Scotland and the north of England, as John Ray now reports.
There is precious little calm after the storm, but plenty of anger in the aftermath of Aarwin's fury.
It's appalling, and you should hold your heads in shame.
In County Durham, villagers confront the county council leader.
Very emotional again today because I'm sick of hearing of the powers that be that are telling people that they are doing things and have done things when they blatantly haven't.
This community centre in St John's Chapel is the sole sanctuary for hot food and a warm welcome. A major incident has now been declared, but women like Gail Davis have been living this emergency for a week.
Can't have a bath, can't have a shower, can't do any washing or drying, ironing, no hot water, because we've got no internet.
And we will try and help you.
The local authority insists it's acted as quickly as it can. The army was called in today.
Just wanted to see how things are with power, fuel, heating.
A doorstep deployment to ensure the old, cold or vulnerable aren't neglected.
But we're OK, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Power companies face a review of their response to the crisis and into the resilience of the network. The industry watchdog has lifted the £700 limit on compensation. Small consolation.
It just hasn't been good enough. I mean, imagine if this was to happen in London, there'd be absolute uproar. Like, it would be sorted within a second, wouldn't it?
In Aberdeenshire, 800 engineers from across the country are now at work. The damage is said to be unprecedented.
We've not known a challenge like this in decades, to be honest. The scale of the damage that the storm has created is, well, from our calculations, at least 5 times worse than the worst storm that we have on record going back to 2005.
More customers will be reconnected over the weekend, but tonight thousands are still out of power and out of patience. John Ray, ITV News.
Still to come on the ITV Evening News, why Alec Baldwin says he is not responsible for the shooting that killed a director on his film set.
Someone is responsible for what happened, and I can't say who that is, but I know it's not me.
And Summit Special, the 4-year-old trekking to the mountaintops. First, survivors of the Grenfell Tower disaster say a sponsorship deal between Mercedes Formula One and cladding firm Kingspan is an insult. Kingspan supplied insulation used on the building where 72 people lost their lives. Housing Secretary Michael Gove added further pressure today, calling for the Mercedes team boss to reconsider. Here's our political correspondent Libby Vina on the row.
Kingspan are on the cutting edge of sustainable buildings.
A new sponsor now featuring on Mercedes team cars in this weekend's Grand Prix, including one driven by Lewis Hamilton. But Kingspan is known for something else too, supplying insulation used in Grenfell Tower, which allegedly fueled the fire that killed 72 people. Nabil Choucair, who lost 6 members of his family, says the sponsorship deal is an insult.
You either respect the families, who, especially the people who were lost, the loved ones, or you don't respect them, you know. And if you respect them, you shouldn't be working with the people that are still under investigation.
Tonight, the Housing Secretary, Michael Gove, wrote to Mercedes boss Toto Wolff, urging him to reconsider and expressing support for the Grenfell families. They are right to feel deeply hurt and aggrieved by your decision to sign this sponsorship deal, he wrote, whilst the public inquiry continues. Last year, a Kingspan manager apologised to the inquiry after an email revealed his response to a question on fire safety. They're getting me confused with someone who gives a damn.
Firstly, I can only apologise for the contents of this email at the time made in 2008.
But today the company was defiant, saying Kingspan played no role in the design of the cladding system on Grenfell Tower, where its K15 product constituted approximately 5% of the insulation and was used as a substitute product without Kingspan's knowledge in a system that was not compliant with the building's regulations. That hasn't gone down well with Olivia Murphy, a Formula One fan who can't sell her Brighton flat, she says because of Kingspan materials, and wants the deal scrapped.
All the stress and anxiety knowing that I've got a combustible insulation in my wall that is Kingspan, and so to see my favourite team of my favourite sport in a partnership with them, it was just so upsetting.
Mercedes has apologised for what its boss called the additional hurt the announcement has caused, but not for doing the deal in the first place. Libby Wiener, ITV News, Westminster.
Conservative Louis French has become the UK's newest MP following the Old Bexley and Sidcup by-election. Mr French took more than half of the votes in the contest, which was triggered by the death of former Cabinet Minister James Brokenshire. The Tory majority was slashed from almost 19,000 to 4,500, but voter turnout was low. Hollywood star Alec Baldwin says he feels no guilt about the shooting which killed cinematographer Helena Hutchins. In a revealing TV interview, the actor said he didn't pull the trigger of the gun involved, but did pull back the hammer and let it go. And he admits that his acting career may now be over. Rupert Evelyn has more.
He says he doesn't feel guilty. He isn't a victim, and he didn't pull the trigger. But it was a bullet from the gun Alec Baldwin was holding that killed cinematographer Helena Hutchins.
Do you feel guilt?
No. I feel that there is. I feel that someone is responsible for what happened, and I can't say who that is, but I know it's not me.
This was the star's first full public statement about what happened on the set of the movie Rust in October. It was a cross-examination of an actor, carefully setting out his version of events.
I cocked the gun, I go, can you see that? Can you see that? Can you see that? And she says, and then I let go of the hammer of the gun and the gun goes off. I let go of the hammer of the gun and the gun goes off.
At the moment, the decisive
That was the moment the gun went off, yeah. That was the moment the gun went off.
It wasn't in the script for the trigger to be pulled.
Well, the trigger wasn't pulled. I didn't pull the trigger.
So you never pulled the trigger?
No. I would never point a gun at anyone and pull a trigger at them, never. That was the training that I had. You don't point a gun at me and pull the trigger at them.
For those watching across America, the hour-long prime-time interview solved little. There is much more to understand, especially for the legal representatives of those directly impacted by the tragedy.
I'm not saying all the fault is on Baldwin, but for him to suggest no fault is on him is absurd. He should have checked that gun. He's the one who held it. He's the one who pointed it. He never should have pointed that gun at a human being. Never, whether someone told him it was cold or not. He bears responsibility.
His sorrow is evident, but nothing changes the fact that a 42-year-old professional married mother died at work. The court of public opinion still wants to know why a live round was in the gun and who put it there. Questions that may one day be answered, perhaps, in a court of law. Rupert Evelyn, ITV News.
Theatre star Sir Anthony Sher has died of cancer at the age of 72.
Now is the winter of our discontent, made glorious summer by this son of York.
He is best remembered, of course, for his role in Richard III, a part which earned him an Olivier Award in 1985. He was a member of the Royal Shakespeare Company for nearly 40 years. The organisation said they were deeply saddened by the news.
But I'm not shaped.
And finally tonight, climbing to the top of Mount Snowdon is an achievement for any adult. But when 4-year-old Albie Jr. Thomas reached the summit at the weekend, it wasn't just his age that made it impressive. He climbed with a prosthetic leg during Storm Aarwin. And as Martin Stew now reports, Albie now has one more reason to celebrate.
Happy birthday to you.
Albie's 5 today. This little lad has already achieved something in his short life most of us never will.
The last few stats for little Albie.
Last weekend, he became one of the youngest people ever to climb to the 1,000-metre high summit of Mount Snowdon.
That's it. Go on. Go left, Albie.
What was the hardest bit?
None of it.
None of it was hard?
None of it.
First time Dad slipped on the mountain.
Yeah.
So were you helping your dad out then? You having to look after him?
Piggybacked me, didn't you?
And there's something else that makes his achievement even more remarkable.
You've got a superpower, haven't you? Can I see it? Can you show me a superpower? Oh my goodness, look at that!
Blade kick.
The bottom half of Albie's left leg was amputated when he was 15 months old. Ever since, Dad Daniel has been determined nothing will hold him back.
There and then, I whispered in his ear. I said, I'm going to get you in the Paralympics.
Go on, Albie! You can do it!
It's his journey and it's my journey. Like, that's what he's gave me, such power in myself, more inspiration, much this. And now it's my turn, giving it all back to him.
Albie loves watching Paralympic champions, but his real hero is closer to home.
I'm right next to you. I'm right next to you.
Your dad?
Yeah.
He's your hero?
Yeah. High knees, go, 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 go.
Together, they've already raised thousands for charity.
What are we going to do next?
We'll win another.
Is that what you want to do?
Of course!
With a smile on his face and a spring in his step, you wouldn't bet against Albie achieving anything.
Keep going, House.
Martin Stew, ITV News.
What an incredible little boy. All right, that's all for now, Geelies. We'll be here later, right after I'm a Celebrity tonight, but for me and the whole team, bye-bye.